Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. And we're back again with the Fiqh of Da'wah series. We wanted to talk a little about the whole concept of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil and correcting one another. The question before us is, what are the objectives to these activities? Enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, correcting one another. When we reflect briefly on the ayah of the Quran, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر إلى آخر الآية. And when we come back again to Surah Al-Hujurat, which I've been focusing on a lot within these past weeks, the part in Surah Al-Hujurat which talks about us being brothers, believers are brothers to one another, and then the point comes up, فَاسْلَهُ بَيْنَ أَخْوَيْكُمْ, to bring about islah between your brothers. And of course we know that the general rule is these ayat of the Quran are applied to both males and females unless there's some external evidence which would indicate to the opposite of that females are excluded from the equation. But in general, all of these ayat are applied to males and females. Now, one of the things that comes to the equation here is that firstly, when we start talking about enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, there has been this understanding, specifically within the context of the American Muslim community, that when I'm enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, I'm enjoining what is haq, what is true. And there's an identification that people begin to have with themselves as being the sword of truth, themselves being the knower of truth. And so if you go against what that person is saying, then there was like this automatic default position that you went against the truth. And unfortunately, there was good and there was a lot of bad that came out of that mindset. Because the reality of the situation, when we start talking about al-amr wal-inkar, to command something and to reject something, is that comes within the context of rules. And the dangerous point here is when we think that we can operate outside of the scope, not only of knowledge, but outside of the scope of love, outside of the scope of wanting good for others. And how is it that we go about it? Yeah, and there's a time period, when maybe you may raise your voice or whatever. Okay, fine. But the reality of the question still comes back to, what is the intention? You understand what I'm saying? And that's where we have to be clear with ourselves. Is the intention, when a person is used to being in a leadership position, or when a person is used to over talking, or when a person is used to wanting to be right or being right, that psychology is a different type of psychology that comes into play in enjoying the good and forbidding the evil than the psychology which wants to see good come about. Like, so what is the goal? That's what we have to look at. Firstly, when we look at the ayat of the Quran that we mentioned, the first one, it talks about the community being a community that's possessed of goodness, great goodness. When good, here good is known as that. al-ma'ruf, right? Al-ma'ruf is that which is known between us. So that means that there's a set of relationships already that is between us that is established on goodness. In other words, even when we look at the prophets coming to teach the people, punishment, it doesn't come before people are well established in what is good. And so it's the same thing, like when we're engaging and rejecting one another or rejecting a particular action, the end game in that is because we want to establish our affairs and that which is good with one another. And the danger comes when we begin to think at times that certain things are just one way or is only the way that I see it. And this is where we take a lesson in usul al-fiqh, in the concept of al-qat'i, in the concept of al-dhanni, or absolutes, or that which is open to more than one idea or one perspective or one insight. More than one insight. In a lot of situations in life, they can be understood in multiple ways. And so when we start, certain things we're arguing about with each other, they could be understood in multiple ways. Sometimes it's not an issue of one person being right. You know what I'm saying? That's one issue that comes up. The second issue is what is to our benefit when we start talking about reality in our dealings with each other. That's the discussion that we should be having. Like, what is going to benefit us? That's the discussion that we should have when we start talking about enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. What is within the common good? And then what is at the good for the individual? How can we understand those things? And when we talk about being Muslim in this context, we're talking about weighing our decision making and our perceptions and our understanding of this in light of guidance from Islam as much as possible. The other issue, and I want to close with this, is when we start talking about correcting each other in terms of the concept of Islah. And I realize that the translation for Islah has been detrimental, because the translation for Islah, it looks at the reality from what angle. Islah has a word. The best word that I've seen so far, and maybe others may have a better equivalent in the English language, has been to ameliorate. And that means to bring about the good in the situation, or bring the situation to soundness, or arbitrate in the situation so that good comes about. It's not to correct in the concept of I'm imposing this to make it right. And totally, you understand what I'm saying? That doesn't give the total impression of what we need from the meaning. Because the word Islah, it has a lot to do with mending. It has a lot to do with repairing relationships. It has to do with a positive tone, and to make relations as much as possible come to a state in which people are reconciled with one another. And that's why when we look at the concept of enjoying the good and forbidding the evil, and I'm leaving with this, we have to realize that we have to weigh harm and benefit. And weighing harm and benefit in Islam has a set of rules. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.